This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world at large. John Bailey with Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons, and of course, the Dean of Journalism for the City of White Plains, Jim Benerofe. And without further ado, headlines, please.
And here are the headlines for the week of March 16th. County legislators set to grill Con Edison on 10-day power restoration. Con Edison head says it was a big storm. White Plains, Ben Boykin, chairman of the Board of Legislators, tells what the legislators will ask about. Estimated half of White Plains high school students join National Enough demonstration Wednesday morning, organized by students. School district posts video of public security meeting on website. Dr. Ricka says threatening social media will be turned over to police for investigation. County legislature passes Immigrant Protection Act. County executive scheduled to sign it into law Tuesday. Shelley Mayer, Julie Killian, state senate race heats up with attack flyers. 3 reporters tell it like it is in journalism today to the Council of Neighborhood Associations. FASNY papers to be turned over to Judge Lefkowitz today for a decision. Appeal by anti-FASNY homeowners certain if deed restriction upheld.
Thank you, Jim. And we'll go to the White Plains Week roll of newsreel march of time. Remember last week we showed video of George Latimer and various legislators criticizing Con Ed exceptionally strongly in the county center.
It was so strong that they are demanding that there be an executive shakeup at Con Edison.
Yeah, well, that controversy will continue on Monday when the county legislators have Con Ed in for an explanation. And we also got, before we could get it last week, because we taped in the morning, John McAvoy.
John McAvoy is the chairman, president, and CEO of Con Edison. And those are 3 very, very high-level titles for one person to have, and as such, he really runs Con Edison. George Latimer, the county executive, and the others were demanding that McAvoy resign and that others below McAvoy in the Con Ed hierarchy also resign because of the poor performance by the utility after the storms in restoring power to its customers. Now, just after Latimer and the others held their event last Friday morning, McAvoy held a news conference of his own at Con Edison's Corporate Emergency Response Center in Manhattan.
With winter storms, we're used to seeing trees and limbs down that take down our wires and interrupt power to customers. These storms, the tree damage we're seeing is much more extensive. Large limbs came down, many trees completely uprooted, and the result of that is that we're not just repairing our system. In many cases, we're actually rebuilding it. Because the size of the second storm was like the first, so large, it affected many states. Many states had over 100,000 customers out, total in the Northeast of 1.1 million. Because it was so wide, some of the mutual aid workers that we had here were called back to work on their home utilities. And so we lost some people that had been working with us on Wednesday that had to go back to the utilities on Thursday. We also saw that Wednesday, for much of the working part of the day, because of the high winds and heavy snow, our crews were not able to work in the overhead area. So we saw some slowdowns in progress as a result of the second storm. We have seen significant problems in us providing accurate and consistent information to our customers and our municipalities. The customers and municipalities count on us to give them things like ETRs, estimated time of restoration. They count on us to provide municipal information for each area, and they count on us to provide outage maps. And we experience very significant problems with our technology systems that take in the customer data and turn it into things like outage maps and municipal information. The end result was something that was really very negative. We take a very distressed condition where normal life is disrupted by the outages themselves, and we added on to that, unfortunately, robocalls that were multiple times per customer. We saw cases where we were frequently changing the ETRs, and some cases where customers were told they were back in service when in fact they weren't. We got our arms around what was causing that in the systems. You could call it a bug or a glitch, but it was something that in the system as a result of some of the recent work that had been done. We've got our arms around it now. It is one of the major lessons learned and areas for commitment for us to make improvements going forward. I will tell you that it did not result in crews working unproductively. We didn't dispatch crews to wrong areas as a result of that, but it certainly added another level of frustration for our customers. We deeply regret the impact that that has had on them, and we've got our arms around it for now, and I am absolutely committed to ensuring that we fix that so that it does not happen again.
And he also said he's absolutely committed to staying in his position.
No. Well, Commissioner, the chairman of the Board of Legislators, Benjamin Boykin, I asked him yesterday, on Thursday, what the committee is going to ask Con Ed on Monday. Here's what he said.
Well, we will be calling for what is called a committee of the whole on Monday, March 19th. At 12 p.m. And Con Edison and NISAC will be in to discuss issues relating to the storm. We will talk about their preparation. We will talk about their response thereafter. We will talk about their learnings from Sandy, or what they have learned from Sandy. We will spend a lot of times talking about communications. Communications with public officials, municipalities, and the residents that they serve.
Now, what specifically really got you particularly mad about this situation?
Well, I think that as a public official, as an elected official, I got the phone calls. I knew people who were outpowered. I knew that the other end of my block was without power. I knew 500 people houses within that area where I live in White Plains was without power. Our director of communications, Jessica Trevocas, was without power for 8 days. So we know the stories. I heard a story last night from someone who lived in Harrison who said, I spent $2,000 out of my pocket staying in the hotel for 8 days with a sick husband. We know Up County looks like a disaster area. So when you get that, and when you see what, in all respects, tended to be a timid response to this storm, which was one of the largest storms we've ever had.
Fifth largest, according to Con Ed.
We need to have some explanations of how you were prepared and how you responded.
And this morning, Con Ed announced on Facebook that they are going to reimburse persons who were without power for 3 days for their food losses. And we have to decide whether they'll also do hotel bills too. I have to find that out. But that is in response to the legislatures calling for just such restitution earlier in the week. What do we think?
Well, I think that's good that that's happening. We'll see if I get reimbursed for food
Yes.
at least. And anyway, I did want to comment on one thing. I mean, they're calling for changes in the leadership of these utility companies. And if people understand the capitalist system of government, what we need people to do in Westchester, and there's probably enough people in Westchester to make a significant dent in their voting power, is to buy shares of Con Ed stock. And if they are dissatisfied with leadership, vote them out of office. That's the only way.
Takeover.
The county, you don't want public officials being able to dictate, taking down a company president that's going beyond the scope of their responsibilities.
Well, actually, now George Latimer, in this news conference, this dog and pony show they put on last Friday, was quite specific in saying that it's not the intent of the county to dictate to businesses how to operate.
Yeah.
However, where you have a special public responsibility, such as is the case in a large electric utility, which has a monopoly really on delivering electrons to people's houses, you have a very special responsibility. And in that situation, it becomes incumbent upon the government to be sure that the utility is operated in a responsible and very responsive manner and has the capability to respond. I think really what needs to come out here is an examination of the backup capability that Con Edison and New York State Electric and Gas really have. It seems to me from my reporting for the Westchester County Business Journal, where I do some things, that one thing that has happened over the years is that all of the utilities, not just Con Edison, this is really nationwide, they have cut back on their manpower. They have cut back on the physical backup of the rolling stock, the trucks they have to go out and meet an emergency, and they've gone to a shared approach to it. The theory being that if we get hit with a bad storm in the Northeast, we can call on the utility companies in the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast to send up their crews
But it takes them
to
a
bail
while
us
to
out.
get here.
Conversely, if they have a problem down south, we'll send our crews down there. In fact, Con Edison had a bunch of employees and equipment in Puerto Rico helping out on that island. So they were caught somewhat short-handed because of that. But what has happened now, we're in an era of global warming, which means more intense storms, more frequent storms, and storms which are physically much larger. This particular situation that we have just experienced, we had two very, very large storms which covered hundreds and hundreds of miles of the East Coast and stretching further west than your typical nor'easter stretches.
One of them was close to a Category 1 hurricane in strength, which was nowhere near Sandy.
So in that clip where John McAvoy of Con Edison explains that this physically was a very difficult situation because it covered such a wide area, and other utilities had to call back their crews or could not spare the crews to begin with, he's absolutely correct. And the question is, how do the utilities, not just Con Ed, but the utilities in general, deal with this?
More to the point, how much would it cost Con Ed on an annual basis have the number of trucks they brought in from other areas and their crews on staff full-time, and how can they cooperate better simultaneously with the communities? They have to give us the cost.
And more significantly, on a national level, we have to look at FEMA. What does FEMA do? How are they handling storm recovery issues?
Where are those trailers?
We have to look at our infrastructure. We also have to look at an administration which puts into the Environmental Protection Agency an administrator who doesn't believe in global warming.
Well, you know, there's a lot of people that don't belong in any of those positions down there in Washington. And meanwhile, there was a huge protest on guns across the country. It was called the Enough Movement. This is a picture of Pleasantville High on Wednesday. We do not have a picture of the White Plains High School demonstration because it was closed to the press. But crowds like this all over the country. I went to Pleasantville High School.
10 a.m. Wednesday, high school students literally walked out to show solidarity and to make a political statement that it is time to do something, not only about school safety per se, but also about guns.
Yes, Dr. Ricca, who was there observing it, said the kids were extremely serious. They were amazing, and he said that they read the names of the faculty and students killed at Parkland, Florida, and they also said that guns had no place in schools, and they wanted to feel safe in their schools, and they formed a heart.
I don't know where this was, but mentioning guns in schools and teachers using guns, there was a teacher teaching a class about guns. I guess it was part of their curriculum, wherever it was, and I don't remember where, but it was on the news. And he was checking the gun to see if it was loaded, and it went off, injuring 3 students. So this idea of teachers having guns, I think, is total nonsense, and
many people
really dangerous concept.
Agree that adding, I think we had figured 1.4 million guns. Initially, President Trump said all teachers should carry guns, so that would be 1.4 million approximately in the category that they were looking at doing. And introducing guns into the classroom has met with very, very negative reaction.
Yes.
But one thing that we need to keep in mind is that this movement that we saw beginning on Wednesday, beginning in earnest nationwide on Wednesday, is really as grassroots as it comes. This was started by high school students. It was started by survivors of the massacre in Parkland, Florida. And these are the future voters of America.
And they're starting to pay attention, which is what this country needs. It's going to be running at Sunday. 1,000 students estimated participated at White Plains High Schools. That is 50% of the high school enrollment. Now, the county legislature passed the Immigrant Protection Act this week, and Benjamin Boykin, in my interview, tells about what it does.
Well, first of all, let me start out, John, by saying this is not a sanctuary bill. It is fully compliant with all New York state law and all federal law. What this bill does is it allows all residents not to fear going to police when there are issues. Also, it says that the police or have a public safety will, if there's a warrant out, cooperate. But they're not going to be providing other information. So it is compliant with all laws, and it will protect all residents because they do not and should not have any fear of reaching out to our public safety officers.
Did the county have reports of communities being reluctant to cooperate with police and provide information on crimes and conditions around the county this past year?
Well, we do know that many people who were immigrants refused to come out. I was at several functions last year where the crowd was much smaller than it normally had been. And the reason I was told that people were afraid that ICE would be waiting for them when they left the buildings. So they did not come out. So we have that information, anecdotal, and also visible from all over the counties. So we do know there is fear throughout the immigrant community throughout the county. And this bill says, do not fear.
And John, you said that Latimer is going to sign it into law on Tuesday.
That's correct. That's what I was told. Now, what happened in Washington this week? Another quiet week?
Oh, anything but. White House Chief of Staff General John Kelly is expected to resign sometime today. We're recording this program on Friday, March 16th, and by the time you see this, you will know whether that report is true. The White House press office denies published reports that President Trump has told Kelly that he plans to fire security advisor General John McMaster. Conservative commentator Bill Kristol says he has been told that Trump plans to fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions and replace him with the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt. Trump believes that Pruitt can be put into the job of Attorney General without Senate confirmation because Pruitt already has been confirmed by the Senate for his current position. Once Trump has dumped Sessions and moved Pruitt over to head the Justice Department, Pruitt would fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Talk about an explosion in Washington. Just wait. Mueller has subpoenaed documents from the Trump Organization. Mueller is now following the money in his investigation of corruption, obstruction of justice, and Russian interference in the presidential election. For example, Mueller is reportedly taking, Jim, you'll be interested in this one. Mueller reportedly is taking a close look at the alleged flow of Russian mob money into Trump real estate projects. For example, son Eric Trump has already admitted that Russian money has funded Trump golf courses. Reports say after Japanese officials met with Trump at the White House, they also met with son-in-law Jared Kushner. Shortly after that, changes were made in U.S. foreign policy that favored Japan. And within days, a Japanese company, partially owned by the Japanese government, invested about $180 million in a Brooklyn building owned by the Kushner Company, which had been sitting vacant awaiting renovation. Now that building is still vacant and still awaiting renovation after a year. Documents have surfaced which show that Trump's HUD Secretary, Ben Carson, was lying when he denied knowledge that a $31,000 dining room set had been bought for his office. The documents show that Carson and his wife both were involved in selecting the furniture. It's also reported that Mrs. Carson was told that the government had a $5,000 limit on redecoration expenses, but she told HUD employees to ignore the limit and find more money. The Trump administration says it has imposed new sanctions on the Russians, but the people it named in its announcement were the same ones that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has already indicted. Trump says the reason Democrat Connor Lamb beat Republican Rick Saccone for Congress in Tuesday's special election in Pennsylvania is that Lamb was imitating Trump in his campaign. Anyone who watched the campaign knows that that simply is not true. Trump had won that Pennsylvania district by 20 points. President Trump fired Secretary of State Rex Tillerson by a post on Twitter. He did not even call Tillerson until hours later, reportedly after General Kelly kept pestering Trump to show some common courtesy and civility. Observers couldn't help noting that for someone who made such a big deal of saying you're fired during a television show, Trump has not had the courage to look people in the eye and say the same thing in real life. President Trump spoke to a Republican fundraiser this week, which was closed to the press, but someone there made an audio recording. Trump is heard bragging to the Republican contributors that he lied to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau when the two met. The U.S. has a trade surplus of $12 billion with Canada, and when Trudeau told that to Trump, Trump says he told Trudeau that Trudeau was wrong. Trump is heard on this recording admitting that when he made that claim, he had no idea whether there was a trade surplus or deficit with Canada, and he was just making up what he was telling Trudeau. Michael Avanti,
as he goes along.
Michael Avanti, the attorney for porn star Stormy Daniels, says Daniels was threatened with physical harm if she didn't keep quiet about her affair with Donald Trump. When asked whether it was Trump who threatened to harm her, he would neither confirm nor deny that it was Trump. Avanti was on the TV show Morning Joe, and like father, like son, we hear that Donald Trump Jr. is getting a divorce.
Well, that's breathtaking. And this is not funny.
If General Kelly does in fact resign, now that's what the morning stories say, that his resignation is imminent, one has to wonder what kind of adults will be in there running the White House.
Well, if Mr. Mueller is fired, you can bet that that investigation is going to stop.
Some people say that if Mueller is fired, people will take to the streets in this country.
No, they won't. They just won't. And if they shouldn't, because then the president can invoke martial law, and it will be no more democracy. That's the plan. That's what
That's provided that the people who are supposedly enforcing the martial law will agree with the president.
Well, that remains to be seen. It's a risky step for him to do, but I can see him doing it.
Anything else more benign and less threatening to our democracy go on this week, John?
Well, it is somewhat of a threat, if you think about it. Shelley Mayer and Julie Killian have now descended into the mudslinging stage of the campaign. These arrived this week.
They're trying to take the state senate seat occupied by George Latimer before he became county executive.
And that election is on the 24th. Mayor's brochure on the left is attacking Killian's voting record on taxes, a very similar attack that was made on Noam Bramson a few years ago. And Killian is pointing out Shelley Mayer's rather docile record on corruption. Docile indeed. Now, reporters were at the disposal of the CNA Tuesday night. I was invited to be on the panel talking about journalism today. And the organization, in their questioning, didn't really feel that interested in finding out how journalism really works.
That's Rich Liebson of the Journal News, a long-time, well-respected reporter in White Plains. In the center, Catherine Chiaffi, who was with WCBS Radio for a long time. She now is communications director for the Latimer administration.
Right. And basically, we found out from Mr. Liebson that journalism selections are based on clicks.
In other words, what they're publishing in the Journal News newspaper is based on how many people click on a story online?
Right, exactly. And they do more of that. The most popular, restaurants and entertainment. That's what people like to see. Shocker of the week is FASNY is back in court today with these briefs from the homeowners suing FASNY and asking for their covenant deed to be reinforced. FASNY says this is just not right and is just rehashing an old decision. But we will see. It's going to be reviewed by Judge Leskowitz, and we'll see. So that's it for us tonight. John Bailey, Peter Katz, Jim Benerofe. Good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week. News and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.